Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to this educational series about annual general meetings for owners corporations. I'm Michael Darby from Quantum United Management. And with me today, I got the great pleasure of having Michael Teys from New South Wales. Michael, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Michael.
Appreciate your time. Just briefly, Michael's a strata researcher, consultant, author and training presenter. He works with the City Futures Research Centre at the University of New South Wales. He writes and lectures for Deakin University Strata Concepts. Michael's practiced as a strata lawyer for 33 years and has owned and operated strata management businesses across Australia. He's also the Director of Executive Education at Strata Institute Australia, where he writes practical training programs and resources that strata managers can use every day. And Michael's currently running one of those programs for managers around annual general meetings. So good timing, Michael, to talk about annual general meetings.
Yes, indeed.
So the process for today, there's legislative steps that we need to work through in Victoria here, and we'll touch on those and also bounce off Michael for his ideas and practical tips around AGMs also in his extensive experience. So we'll work through it in that manner and see how we go. First of all, in relation to calling an annual general meeting, what is an annual general meeting and why do we hold them? I guess it's a gathering of owners to find out what's been going on in their owners' corporation and to contribute to key decision making and adopt financials and elect committee members, amongst other things. So I would say they're the key reasons. And I think as you indicate in your course, Michael, it's accountability also, isn't it, for the manager and the committee and how they've been operating?
I think that's right, Michael. If you don't have a deadline, nothing happens. And I think that an AGM is really the defining moment for the life of an owner's corporation. Yeah. It gives you something to work towards next year, but it also gives you an opportunity to look backwards at what you've done, to hold yourself accountable to the owners and say, as a committee, we've done this, we've spent this money, we've achieved these things, we haven't got to this yet, that's coming up. But it's a really important point. And when you think about all well-functioning entities, there is always a marker where there is a report. State of the Union address, the annual general meeting of corporations, and in Strata, it's our annual general meeting.
Yeah, indeed. So just coming back to the Act, Section 69 outlines that an owner's corporation must have an AGM that receives and pays out money. That's most of them, I would have thought.
Yes.
And Section 69.2 talks about the time frame. The times between meetings must not exceed 15 months, just to provide some context around that. And who can convene them. So under Section 70, subsection 2, it talks about the chairperson can convene an annual general meeting, the secretary, the manager on the authority of the committee, or in absence of a committee, the manager or a lot owner can indeed convene one. And another sort of practical tip, I guess, is to have a think about, where you're going to hold that and make that a suitable place and a suitable time. They're important, aren't they?
I think the thing about AGMs is that it's a really good sign of a well-run strata. An owner's corporation manager that is calling their meetings regularly on time is a sign that they're on top of their portfolio. Yeah. When I was buying strata management businesses and doing due diligence on them, one of the things I looked for was whether meetings were being held regularly and on time, because that told me that the place was well run. I think owners should set the date for the next AGM as the last thing they do at each AGM.
Yeah.
And I think that, you put it in your book, it's more likely to happen on time if you've agreed it early. It saves time ringing around and seeing what date suits everyone. Yeah. And if you have to move it, you can. But having a default position that we're going to have it on this day is, I think, a good system to get into.
Look, that makes sense. I guess we're a little bit different in the niche that we operate in, sort of large master plan estates, but the majority of managers, they can be managing 50, 80 owners corporations, and it's mayhem. Do you know what I mean? A lot of them aren't super active, and and our managers sometimes are managing 2 clients or 3, and the committees are very active. So our committees like to decide at a later point, but totally makes sense for the majority.
Well, as you say, it's just a mechanism of making sure something is more likely to happen on time.
Yeah, sure. So the next component is issuing the notice for the AGM, which is critical. All the components are critical, but if the notice isn't issued right, then you haven't got a meeting and you've got to hold another one and you're up for action, I guess.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of technicalities to be observed and competent practices like yours are well on top of that, and you'll have systems and processes that can make sure that the papers have what they need to have. One of the things I like to see from strata managers, and I think is helpful for owners, is a bundle of papers that has been thoughtfully put together rather than a heap of photocopies, because there's going to be a lot of paper involved in these things. And I think if you're thoughtful about the way it goes together and making sure that it only contains what it needs to, so not too much and not too little, getting that fine line helps owners absorb and come to the meeting better prepared to make the decision that you're asking them to make.
Absolutely. And I think a lot to do with costs as well, and just unnecessary papers. We've shifted a lot about, we have mobile apps for all of our communities.
Yes.
And a lot of the documents are online. The key documents we print and post, the notice, the agenda, the budget, the financials, all the other reports they get online, so that we're not having to post them out.
Yeah, and that's a great step forward for strata that has traditionally sort of made that as a source of revenue, which I think has always irritated owners, and rightly so.
Yeah, indeed. Look, and another good tip that we do, giving away all my tips early here, meant to keep that for the end, is we do a summary page on the front of the documents. As we both know, and owners are realising as well, the notice, the agenda, it's all very formal and it doesn't make sense, and they give up and put it down halfway through the first page. So we have a cover page which in commentary, sort of conversational format, talks about the AGM, talks about in plain language in terms of their financial position, what the budget's about, and what's been going on in their own corporation over the last year, just in a double-sided A4 page, just a snapshot. And we know that if at least they read that, they've got a good understanding that it's on, when it's on, and if they don't choose to attend, here's a bit of an update. And we know that they'll read the key information that's in, and that's working quite well. So
I was just saying in my course that I'm teaching at the moment, the best strata publication I've ever seen was for a big American condominium scheme, a land subdivision, a couple of thousand members. And the AGM came out in a piece of paper that was like a pamphlet, an A4 page folded as a pamphlet. And it had on the front, welcome. It had in the center, the agenda. On the left-hand side was the accounts in about 10 lines. On the right-hand side was the budget summary in about 10 lines. And on the back was a proxy that in those days you ripped off and sent in. And I actually went through it from the perspective of New South Wales laws to see whether you could actually do that in New South Wales. And you can. You can comply with all the laws by making things available in different ways. So I wonder how long it will be before we get away from the big packet of information to accessing the right information in a more intelligent way. And I think in terms of increasing engagement in an annual general meeting, that'll be a great thing.
So just coming back to the notice, so 14 days notice must be given, and that can be given via email. And look, there's differing views as to appropriate notice period. It says minimum 14 days. We take the view it has to get to them before 14 days. And I think we allow an extra 3 days just to be safe. So get them out to the owners. I think it's about 18 days before the AGM, just to cover off any concern. Is there a specific view around notice periods that you've?
Look, I think as a result of Australia Post's service delivery model, I'm advising people in companies that I'm working with to get their papers right to give 7 days extra notice. But that's only if you're delivering things in a paper form. If you've got emails from all the owners and you're delivering the entire thing by email, of course, it doesn't matter. But, I think people like to see a little bit more than the requirement because it just indicates that it's all being done in a very calm, ordered way. And you're not sort of racing at the last minute to meet deadlines that, have slipped by.
Yeah, sure. And look, like you said, we're pushing always for our owners to provide their email address. And I think the majority, even when we do have their email, we've got probably 90 to 95% of those. We also actively seek for them to proactively acknowledge that they're happy to receive their agent documents via email. And then we get at least 50% of those. So again,
it won't be long, and it'll be convention that we do it that way, and that will make notice easier. Particularly on, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be an issue, but you can bet your bottom dollar that the one time that you've got something controversial will be the time that something goes wrong in the mail and you've got a problem. So the only way to overcome these things is lots of planning and lots of forethought.
So the Act also stipulates what the notice must include, the date, time, place of the meeting, of course, the agenda that you need to outline, the text of any special or unanimous resolutions needs to be in there, the financial statements, of course, the proposed annual budget, which is important, and a statement saying that the owner has a right to appoint a proxy, that you must inform them of that. All the reports, and we cover off those in a moment under agenda, all the reports need to be provided. And of course, minutes of the previous annual general meeting so that owners understand or are aware what happened in the prior year. And then we move on to agenda, which is covered under section 71. And it talks about the agenda with the AGM setting out matters to be, must provide an agenda with the AGM setting out matters to be dealt with at the AGM. So these matters include the election of the committee, of course, the appointment of manager, if that's applicable, the details of any insurance, again, which is important, the details of any fees that have been fixed by the OC during the year. And I think that's probably more saying, a committee might set a special fee, for example, in between AGMs, so it needs to state on what those fees were and what they're about, and the consideration of financial statements, and there's requirements for those to get audited depending on the size of your owner's corporation, and the consideration of the budget, the making of any delegations, so there can be, the owner's corporation might want to proactively handle a matter around delegation. That can be the removing of power or delegating of power, of course. And the reports that it talks about that must be dealt with is the handling of a penalty interest. So talking about if you've waived interest or how you've applied interest, the implementation of the maintenance plan. Insurance valuation reports need to be provided at the next AGM after they've been obtained. Committee report and a report of any subcommittees as well needs to be provided to owners. The manager needs to provide a report as well, of course, and dispute resolution report. So if there's been any agreements or complaint notices in the prescribed form that have been lodged with the owner's corporation, that information needs to be detailed in a report, but you can't nominate the owner's name in that. There's prescribed items. I think there's 7 prescribed points you need to cover, what it was about, did it go to VCAT, etc. That you need to put in that report, but not the relevant owner, of course. And of course, the tabling of and consideration of minutes of the previous meetings, another item that goes on the agenda.
That's a lot of material. And as you say, that's what's required by the Victorian legislation, and it's pretty similar in every other state and territory in Australia. One of the things that you don't get from the legislation, which I think is a good idea, is to put a finishing time on the agenda. You're obliged to put a starting time, but that doesn't mean you can't put a finishing time. And I think by putting a finishing time, you start to create some expectations, some boundaries that helps you run an efficient meeting. I like to think that an AGM of any size complex should take 2 hours. I think after 2 hours, people are tired and frustrated and bored and angry, or some or all of those things. 2 hours means you've got to be working pretty briskly to get through. And I think that's where it comes to a good strata manager and a good chairperson to be able to say, look, this is what's really important. And these are things that are, formalities which we must observe, but let's get through them quickly because we've really got a lot of work to do.
And also you talked about, I think, allocating certain minutes to each item.
It's a good idea. It just helps you keep the pace. The strata manager, whether you're chairing the meeting or assisting the chairperson, you're really the timekeeper, you're the gatekeeper, and you've just got to blow the whistle sometimes and say, hey, we've got to move on to the next item. Otherwise, you'll find, it's 9:30 at night and you're still debating whether there's a comma or a dash in the minutes, and that's not helpful.
Not useful for anyone. And I think in the majority of cases that it's our role as managers to educate and well inform the chairperson, so they're going to be a better chairperson if we're...
I think you work with your chairperson, and some will be very experienced in matters, although the thing about a strata meeting, an annual general meeting, I think this is a point we need to make for your viewers, Michael, is that there is quite a degree of formality about it, and that's imposed upon us by legislation. And some of it's good and some of it's bad, but it's just got to be done. And unlike companies and other things that have more freedom, you can't just sort of duck all over the place and make decisions as it occurs to you. So particularly at an annual general meeting, you've got to take care to really make sure people know what they're coming to decide, and they're not asked to decide things that they haven't been foreshadowed. And I think from an owner's point of view, owners have got to understand that they might not be able to get their particular matter off their chest at an AGM if they haven't put it in the form of a motion. So they might come to the meeting expecting an outcome that they're never going to get.
Yeah.
And that can lead to frustration. So even though general business is not permitted as such, I always like to allow a time for people to raise issues informally that the committee can then take on board as a way of, respecting that people have come to the meeting, they've used their, they've given of their time. They should be respected in that way. But there needs to be some understanding that we have to do what the law says we have to do.
That's right. And look, what we do that works really well is we hold an information session about between 2 to 4 weeks before an AGM. And the AGM, like we spoke about, it's very formal and procedural, and often owners are uncomfortable asking questions there. So we hold an informal information session.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Where we just talk about what you're involved with, what your expectations are as an owner, what our role is as a manager, talk about what's going on, and we get through all the questions there, and that really helps the AGM to go quite seamlessly because you work through all those.
I think those owners from larger complexes of the type that you service, that's an excellent idea. It's also an excellent idea for smaller groups if there's something particularly big coming up, a big repair, new appointment of a contractor or something like that. I think an information meeting helps. As you say, it relaxes people, it gets the best out of people. And it also gives them time to think about things between getting the information and attending the meeting. I mean, an AGM should be a place to make decisions, not to receive information for the first time.
Yeah, indeed. And look, I guess leading on from that, I know you talk about in your course as well to be mindful of the way you're wording the motions and have some commentary that goes with them as well.
Yeah, and I think explanatory notes can be very useful, but they can also clutter. If it's written by somebody who's not thinking about it, who's just sort of prattling on about laws and sections and those sorts of things. I mean, I think, if strata managers have to be talking about sections of acts at a meeting, they've really lost the plot. You need to be working at a higher level than that to get the business done. I mean, you're expected to know those things, and you're expected that your processes and systems follow those laws, but there's no need to be prattling on about them. And I'm sure you understand this, Michael, but they're not interested. They're interested in their building, they're interested in their lifestyle, they're interested in how much they've got to pay, and whether, Section 6 says this or that, they really couldn't care less about.
All right, we might move on to meeting preparation and procedures. And I think I'm going to give away all my tips here, but I think preparation is the key. Is the absolute number one priority for me for the AGM. I think you manage it primarily, and the committee should be doing a lot of preparation for your AGM. I was just looking, I got one of the reports from the guys of our system, and it starts 8 weeks before the annual general meeting, and it goes right through to 4 weeks after. There's a 2, 4, 6, there's a 12-step process with tasks underneath those. I mean, you need to be organised for it to run smoothly, don't you? It's a big part of it.
Yeah, and look, it's like running a court case before the High Court. You've got to make it look effortless. And if it looks effortless, you're compressing a timeline into, perhaps a couple of hours before the best minds and the best legal minds in the country, then you're really on top of your game. Yeah. And it shows. So I think, a lot of work goes in behind the scenes, and a lot of owners need to appreciate that. They need to understand that that's what you're being paid for.
And so we'll move on to meeting preparation and procedures. And just to refer back to the Act again for some of the key points that it talks about. A quorum, again, it's critical with your AGM, of course. Section 77 covers this. All of these sections we'll talk about are post 1st of December 2021 for Victoria, where a number of new changes come in. And it clarifies at least 50% of the total number of lots is required for a quorum, or if not 50% of lot entitlement. I guess a good change for a lot of managers, again, not so much for us, we're always getting attendance to our AGMs, but it talks about that a manager may pass interim resolutions if no one attends an AGM. I think that's good for a lot, isn't it, because of the smaller ones.
And I think on the whole, the law reform from Victoria has been good. I think there's been some sensible things done. There could have been a lot more done, but I think quorums and these sorts of things are making it easier for people who care to get involved and make decisions, and that's important.
So it goes on to say that when a manager's passing these interim resolutions, if no one attends, that of course it can't be about their appointment, and it can't be about an amount 10% greater than the budget. And also it opens the option that an OC may resolve to revoke that power essentially from the manager being able to do that. So that they cover all bases there.
they're all sensible things.
Yeah, indeed. And Section 80 talks about, it confirms that a lot owner can participate in person by teleconference or in accordance with the regulations, by proxy or in another manner provided for by the regulations. And there's no additional sections in the regulations yet about that.
Yeah.
And subject to the Act and the regulations, the procedure of the AGM is in the discretion of the OC. So, look, we haven't utilised that. You follow the Act, it sort of covers most bases. And I think the Act and the regulations also protect an AGM.
Yeah.
Some committees or OCs might read that and say, oh, we can do what we like if it's at the discretion of the owner's corporation, but that's not the intent, of course, is it? It's for minor matters around its operation.
That's meant to, guide people that, you fill in the gaps. If the statute doesn't provide for something, well, common sense should prevail. Common law, if you need to resort to that, meeting procedures are pretty well understood. And you can, call on that body of knowledge to fill in the gaps and make things workable.
Section 78 talks about proceeding without a quorum. And essentially, you can proceed without a quorum. All the resolutions are interim resolutions. And the owners corporation must provide notice to all owners within 14 days of the meeting of those interim resolutions. And it's sort of a little bit complex, but those interim resolutions become formal resolutions after 29 days after the meeting.
Yeah.
If no SGM is convened within the 28 days, and the meeting held within 28 days after the SGM notice is given, only if confirmed at this meeting.
I think all of that's designed to keep things moving. And really, you're given a chance to come to a meeting to make a decision. If you choose not to come, then you shouldn't complain too much. But if something happens that you really object to, then you can bring some action as long as you act quickly to pull that up. And I think that's what those sections are designed to do. And I think, again, helps with the orderly progression of meetings. And it means that those people that want to be involved aren't really left with it, their hands tied because the great majority of people don't turn up.
Yeah, that's right. In relation to chairing the AGM, it's covered under Section 79, and it says that the lot owners choose an owner or the manager to chair the meeting, or if this doesn't happen, the chairperson of the owners corporation, if they're present, chairs the meeting. It's fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
Voting, there's one vote for each lot at an AGM. In relation to special resolutions, so from the 1st of December, there's a new section 97(1)A, which states if the votes for a special resolution don't meet the requirements of section 96, which is 75% voting in favour, and there's a quorum and there's no votes against, the special resolution is taken to be passed as an interim special resolution. So it gives you the ability to pass them without achieving that benchmark of 75%, which is helpful.
I think what you're seeing there with these types of reforms is a recognition by government that in many buildings, in many complexes, there is apathy. There needs to be a way of continuing with decision making without disenfranchising other people. So it's a balancing act to keep things going, but also give you rights to object to things if it's really going.
Especially if it's a decision that requires a special resolution, it's an important one.
It's a big one. And I think, again, this is a welcome reform by the Victorian government to enable people to get on with the job.
Voting's by show of hands or any other prescribed manner unless the meeting resolves otherwise. The resolutions are determined by a simple majority. Again, it's just providing that for clarity. An owner may call for a poll at an annual general meeting, either before or after the vote is taken. And then if there is a poll, the votes are then based on the units of entitlement for that owner, and a poll needs to be done in writing. And look, you do, again, as manager, you need to prepare for that, and that can take some time. That can add half an hour to
avoid polls at all costs.
Indeed. So if the poll is called after a vote has been decided on, then that decision falls away. And the vote of the poll is the final vote, if you like. The chairperson has a casting vote if the voting is equal. If they don't exercise that vote, then the motion isn't passed. In relation to owners in arrears, so an owner who's in arrears either by proxy or in person can't vote at an AGM except for special or unanimous resolutions.
I think this is a matter, Michael, that can get a bit heated, and a good manager, and I'm sure your people do it, will have a quiet word with someone who's unfinancial if they're there and not embarrass them in the meeting. I've seen some people terribly embarrassed and get angry, and there'd be some significant fallout from that. if they're called out for being unfinancial. So I think that's a matter where committees need to be conscious, and maybe a little bit of discretion has got to be used just to make sure people aren't offended or embarrassed.
Yeah, indeed. Look, we do remind us of communication leading up to it, and during our sign-in procedure, you normally got them one-on-one, so you can have a conversation with them at that point.
If you've got someone who turns up to a meeting who's unfinancial, there should be a red flag that says, "Whoops, we've got to go and have a chat with that person on the side and say, listen, we're glad to have you here, but don't vote or don't stand for election until we fix this up."
Yeah. To be determined as not in arrears, I need to pay in cash or 4 days before the annual general meeting. Again, that's important as well. There can be disputes around, I paid it by the day before, unfortunately.
Well, actually, I've looked at this before. The common law provides that you have to accept a cheque on its face, but the statutes have now provided differently. Bags of money and coins at strata meetings is never a good thing.
No, indeed. Proxies, we'll just touch on proxies, which is an important one. So that's where you can nominate another person in writing to vote on your behalf, and you can let them vote how they wish, or you can prescribe for all the motions how you want them to vote, in favour or against, or you can provide someone a proxy to represent you on a committee, for example. The proxy needs to be in writing and needs to be issued to the Secretary of the Owners Corporation. It needs to be in the prescribed form. So there's a prescribed form you can access from Consumer Affairs website, the details, how that's laid out, or your manager can provide you one, no doubt. An important one that often gets done incorrectly is it needs to authorise an individual, and it can't say chairperson. So just make sure, if you're providing a proxy.
There's a lot of technical rules around proxies as you're outlining, and they're useful to get people to come to a meeting and to participate in a different form. But if there's a proxy farming going on, if people are sort of running a proxy campaign, it's a sign that there's real trouble. And a committee might want to take a minute to think about that and really sort of see what's coming up and try and head it off at the pass. Because when people are running proxy campaigns in a strata context, it's hard.
So also in relation to proxies, they must act honestly, in good faith, and exercise due care and diligence. That's pretty heavy wording, isn't it, Mike? I mean, there's a lot around that. It puts a bit of responsibility on you.
Yeah, it does. And it's sort of designed to make people take this seriously and to say, well, look, if I am going to take a power from somebody else, I've got to exercise that carefully. Proxies are generally, in my opinion, problematic things in an annual general meeting if they're being farmed or if they're being collected en masse. If it's just, look, I can't make the meeting because I've got to go to a funeral or a wedding, here's my proxy, that's fine. But when people are going around and canvassing for votes, it sort of starts to threaten the collective's consensus, which is where you want your meetings to be if you can.
Yeah. And look, the new Act sort of touches on that, and I'll cover that in just a moment. Another point around proxies is an owner who is in arrears cannot be a proxy for another owner or represent them on a committee, and that's a new change. And also new changes, there's restrictions on proxy farming. So you can't be a proxy on behalf of more than one owner if the owners corporation has 20 or less lots, and you can't be a proxy for more than 5% of owners if the owners corporation has 20 or more lots. So for example, if it's a 100 lot owners corporation, you can't be a proxy for more than 5 people. And I think that addresses the concerns you're flagging around proxy farming pretty well, I guess, doesn't it? So
it does to an extent, except you can get a phenomenon that I call the angry mob. And the angry mob sort of unite over a particular issue, and there might be 5 in the angry mob, so they go and collect 5 proxies each. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's technically, legally correct. What I'm saying is if you're wanting to run a peaceful show and you're wanting to run a consensus and a sophisticated entity, it's a shame that that's necessary. It'd be better to be able to talk about issues and get resolution between the factions rather than it having to come down to this sort of thing. And when over the years, as I've seen these things develop in communities, when you have a proxy war in a decent size owners corporation, it can take many, many years to heal the wounds. As people sort of feel passionate about whatever issue there is that they're on about, they need to also keep one eye on the bigger picture, and that is we all have to live together, we have to share property together, we are co-owners. We don't just get to walk away. There's no divorce in strata. The only divorce in strata is you sell your lot. You can't sort of, go to the courts and say, hey, I don't want to be part of this anymore. Can I be let go? The answer is no. If I had $1 for every time someone's rung me over the years and said, I want to get out of a strata, how do I do it? I'd be comfortable.
We did have an owner, it would have been 12, 13 years ago, who wanted to secede from the owners' corporation.
Yes.
Of course, that can't
A
happen.
lot of that goes on in Western Australia.
You can by selling your lot, of course. That's the answer.
That's right. Well, I often tell people that they should sell their lot and buy a farm because they're just not meant for community living.
Perhaps, yes. And an important point as well is if you do provide a proxy, you can revoke that at any time. So you don't feel compelled that, if I've given my proxy, that's it. I can't sort of change my mind. You can choose to vote in place of that proxy at any point, and you can revoke it as well just by writing to the secretary. So that's an important one. And also a person, and again, sort of talking about proxy farming, this might come into play. A person can't require or demand that you give a proxy to them to vote on their behalf. And there's penalty points. I think it goes that far in legislation. And also, I haven't seen it happen except many years ago where developers would at times require a proxy in a contract of sale.
Yes, and that's a direct, that provision is a direct strike at that behaviour by developers where they try to get the proxies and control things beyond their period of ownership.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to election of the committee. It's a key item within the AGM. The election of the committee, again, from the 1st of December, an owners corporation with 10 or more lots must elect a committee. An OC must have at least 3, but not more than 7. So that's a new change. It did say 12. So that's now 7. However, it then goes on to say that an owners corporation can resolve to appoint more than 7 if they want to, but not more than 12. So maybe it's setting a new starting point, if nothing else.
One step forward, one step back. But I think the message there is you want a functioning committee.
Yeah.
I think more than 7 is a disaster. 7's a magic number. If you go back in history and look at the history of war, platoons are always made up of 7. It's the most efficient group of people for group decision making and group activity. So there's a good reason for that. And it's an odd number so that if something does go to the vote, then you don't get stuck. So I think, 7's good. Run with 7.
Yeah, indeed. Also, in relation to electing committees, historically, and since the start of the business, it's always been a struggle to get committee members. So you welcome them when they do volunteer, and obviously you can have up to 12. I don't think might on one occasion or twice I've had more than that, but often we get a group of between 6 and 8 or 11. And those owners have been happily volunteered. You welcome them all on as a group, and the members vote for them. And thank you. You're on the committee. There's a different view, and people can refer to our interview with Tim Graham, and he talks about that. Yes, that's commonplace, and perhaps you could also choose to take a more sort of defined view of election and the wording that's using it in the act. And does that then mean that you need to, or that you should, nominate each person who puts themselves forward to go on the committee, that the owners present vote for or against each person on the committee, which is going back to sort of true election sort of processes, I guess. What's your view, Michael?
Well, Tim,
not wanting to put in conflict, but just share.
No. I was just going to say Tim's an excellent lawyer and a good friend of mine, and we've been against each other many times over the years and maintained a friendship. I respect Tim's view. It's a little legalistic, I think. I would only do that in a circumstance where there was conflict or likely to be conflict, where there were factions sort of juggling for positions. In that context, I would have a very close look at the laws about how the procedure should go ahead. Yeah. But in 99 out of 100 times, the way you do it by saying, we're calling for nominations, who's up for committee this year? Hands go up in the air. There's a bit of cajoling and pushing and, my mate, you're up now. Come on, I've done it this long. You need to have a go. All that sort of stuff is the way committees function and the way they should function.
Yeah.
If you've got to get to formal votes and excluding people and nominating people and hearing about people's contribution to society, it's getting a bit out of control, I think.
And look, like you said, if there is concern and maybe a lot of tension or conflict around the committee, existing members or people who are potentially looking to get on, this can be a way to sort of just appease all of that and on a clear process above board, the majority for each member, they get through or they don't, I guess.
Yeah, bring them into the tent.
Yeah. We'll move on to meeting minutes next and then our top 3 tips. Did you want to cover off on anything sort of from a practical level about the operation of the meeting. I think, like we talked about, the time and place of the meeting is important. Choosing a practical room that's got proper seating is important. And I guess the thing that we do, we ask our committee to sit at the front of the room, like on a board table that's presenting to members, so that their members are aware who their committee are.
And I think it's important for them to remember that you're the manager, not the decision maker. And it helps acknowledge people's contribution. And I think perhaps makes people a little bit more sympathetic to things that don't go their way, that, you know, volunteers are putting their time into these things. And before you come along and be too critical, you need to respect that, you know, they've done the work. Whilst you can have your say, of course, people, I think, need to be a little bit more respectful of those that do put in the hard yards, because this stuff takes time. It really takes time, and people are giving up their Sunday afternoons or their Wednesday nights to do this stuff, and they do it for their own reasons, but it should be respected. So in terms of running meetings, I think a good chairperson or a good strata manager is the key. You've got to keep things moving. People need to be heard, but not rabid on. There should, you know, you might, in a big meeting, you might actually need some rules about, and I've been teaching this in my course, you can agree on a few simple rules, like we're each going to talk once, we're each going to speak for no more than 5 minutes. Those sorts of things can help get big items through in a fair and considered way without, you know, everyone getting frustrated because the meeting's dragging on too long or other issues are not getting spoken about.
Look, other things we do when we are signing them in, often, like I said, we get couples there, we give them a voting card as they come in, just so that, again, if you're asking for people's vote during the meeting, again, the couples will forget, they'll both put their hand up, and you can only have one vote for that couple. So
the best run meeting I've ever been at was, ironically, Opal Towers, the building in Sydney that almost fell over. I was in that fight at one point. The meeting was a big meeting, a controversial meeting, and the meeting was run with electronic voting devices. So you sat there and you could click yes and no as the meeting went, and they'd put the motion up and you'd see the votes go up or go down. It was really quite exciting. I guess it won't be that long and we'll all have that technology for meetings, which is a bit better than the old hands in the air.
Indeed. Did they use a mobile phone?
No, yeah, we were all given specific devices, and it was, I understand it's used for big annual general meetings for Telstra and Channel 7 and those sorts of things, but it was very well done. And for a very, very, you know, perhaps the most controversial strata meeting that's ever been held, it was really well done by the strata manager.
Avoids any doubt.
That's right. It was just so well done. It was an expensive job, but, you know, given what was at stake, and, you know, literally people's lives and livelihood was at stake. It was a very well-run meeting.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts around moving and seconding each motion?
Not necessary. And it's the reason it's not necessary, and you have to go back to the common law of meeting procedure. If a motion is on notice, as they are in an annual general meeting, because that in the form of words are on the papers and sent to people, then a proposer and a seconder is not necessary.
Yeah.
It's taken as read.
Yeah.
That can save a lot of time. The only time I would read a motion to a meeting is if there's been a motion to amend, and then I think it's important that people understand what they're voting on. Yeah. But other than that, I dissuade people from getting into that because it just makes a meeting longer than it needs to be.
Yeah. No one's going to put their hand up. You're there for 5 minutes waiting for a move and a second. No.
Yeah, it's just, you know, everyone gets shy and embarrassed, and it's awkward, you know, awkward.
What happens if I'm a mover? What does that mean?
Am I going to get sued? Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah, look, we've moved away from doing it. And like I said, if the motion is amended, it's important to do it then.
Yeah, but that's the correct answer is that it is not necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's all as far as the sort of running of the meeting from me around key tips. So moving on to meeting minutes, also a critical component. They're all critical, it seems, Michael, as we work through them. But and again, meetings are very critical. They're a reflection of the decisions that are made at that meeting, of course. And they're covered under Section 81 of the Owners Corporation Act. And it just clarifies an OC must keep minutes of their general meetings. It talks about information that must be recorded in the minutes. And it states that the date, time and place must be recorded, the names of lot owners present, the names of owners who provided a proxy and who they provide the proxy to. The voting of resolutions, of course, needs to go in there. The text of all resolutions that the OC made at that meeting also goes in there.
I think what's important about that, Michael, is what is not on that list, and that is we don't record debate. Minutes are for recording process and decisions. They're not for recording debate. That's a transcript, and that's not what minutes are. And I think this becomes important when someone who doesn't get their way at a meeting will stand up and say, you know, I want my objection noted in the minutes. And I always say no to that, because the minutes are a record of the proceedings and it stands forever. And people that are buying into the property look at those minutes. They might not look at much else, but they might look at the minutes. If you're recording dissensions, you're giving undue weight to one person's view. That's not
Which is what they're seeking, probably, isn't it?
It's exactly what they're seeking, and that's not what they're for. So I always say no to that, and I say, look, if you feel strongly about it, you can write a letter to the secretary, and that's on the records of the owners' corporation body for anyone to see if the time comes, but it's not going in the minutes.
Yeah. And the important thing, again, you touched on it, and we do that as well, is soon after the meeting, the next day, we collate any action items and put those into our sort of task management software. And also you start to record them very soon afterwards, well, again, while it's fresh in your mind.
That's right, yeah.
Internally for us, we advise owners that we record the meeting just for the sake of the minutes, because they can be quite long and a lot to cover, and we destroy that afterwards, but that's very valuable for pulling. Just make sure we get them very accurate around each motion that's passed. And look, and we do put some commentary in there, and we don't get too out of control. For some important motions, it can provide a bit of context, which is important.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful about that.
So that's all in relation to minutes. Again, it's important that, especially if there's no quorum and it's an interim resolution, those minutes have to get out within those 14 days to owners. So that's a pretty tight turnaround as well that we need to aim for. So just to wrap up, Michael, I mean, there's a lot there. We didn't cover everything, but I think we covered the key points that we needed to really give owners a good overview of the annual general meetings and the process for them. I guess some top tips. I mean, I've probably dropped mine during that session.
You go first.
I think that's the key, John, especially, from our context as managers. The committees appreciate it. The owners appreciate it. Some might not even have, like we spoke about, they may not have an awareness of how much preparation you've done, and that's the whole point. Sometimes it just runs so smoothly. They think it's all fell together, but that's not the case indeed.
Yeah, that's right. What's your second one?
No, that was the three of them, I think.
Oh, that's the three of them. Okay, all right.
That 3 times for me. That's how important it is.
I think that's right from your point of view. Look, thinking from an owner's point of view, I would like to say, number one, don't just come with problems. Come with a solution, or come with a possible solution. And I think if you're a lot owner and you're turning up and you're opposed to something, it's your right to say something. But I think to be respectful to the committee who have put in the work, you want to add something constructive, and you encourage a committee to continue to do good work when you are participating in a constructive way. So my first thing would be to come with some sort of constructive solution. My second point is to be realistic. I think in meetings, and when I was practicing as a lawyer, I'd only get invited to the worst bun fights in town, sometimes in other towns. So I get a bit of a jaundiced view. But in really contested hot meetings where there's a lot of emotion, I think you have to be realistic about what you can achieve at a meeting. I'm not going to change your personality or your behaviour at a meeting. This is a nanosecond in our life, and you've got to be realistic about what you're trying to achieve at a meeting. These things are not about world peace. They're not about world domination. They're about managing common property. And we've got to get back to the fundamentals. Why are we here? Is it such a big deal? Is this really going to matter in 5 years' time? And get past the irritations of people's behaviour and unpleasantness. People are sometimes just rude and stupid, but there's nothing we can do about that in an owners corporation meeting. We just have to do what we can. So be realistic is my second point. My third point is to be reasonable. And it's interesting when you look at the laws around Australia, you don't actually have to be reasonable in a lot of states and territories when it comes to strata. Victoria is one where you do. So it's required by the law that you act reasonably. But more than that, in meeting procedures, I think being reasonable goes a long way to helping, get your way. You get more with honey than you do with trying to beat people to death. And I encourage people to be reasonable and just to, take a breath and not get aggravated by someone else's behaviour.
Yeah. Look, I guess I'd add to that one, to touches on your first point, for owners to be comfortable to, ask questions beforehand. If you're reading the documents and there's something you're not sure about,
Yeah.
Don't feel like you have to wait for the AGM. Reach out to the manager beforehand. You can get a relaxed, longer answer, and they can work through and give the information you're looking for. And you're going to get a lot better outcome, be more well informed than tabling out the actual meeting itself.
And then feeling angry because you didn't get the level of response that you wanted.
Yeah, indeed. All right. I appreciate your time, Michael. Thanks so much. I mean, we covered over a lot, but I think we touched on all the key points. Appreciate your input.
Thank
And
you
hope
very
you
much.
all, thanks, Michael. And I hope you all got some information and can improve and run better AGMs moving forward. Thanks for your time. Enjoy, everyone.